Okay, we're going to move on to our next story here. Our next story is The Wreck of the Meduse. Now, it's in French. I'm not going to speak in French, but I actually have an interesting story about that, but I'm running out of time, so. The ship is French. It's a French ship. So, whether or not I'm pronouncing Meduse right, I apologize once again. It means jellyfish in French, I know that. It was this big boat. It was this big boat. Now, before we get started, like I said, this story is interactive. I want you to pick a number between 1 and 10. Go ahead and get that number in your head. And that number, if you pick the right one, you will survive this story. The Meduse was a boat, a big old boat. And we're back in the year 1816. We're headed to Senegal. Not Stephen, but to the African country. France. The French were like, hey, we got to send this new governor down here. Let's get him on this boat. We'll send another couple boats with it. Be a short ride, no problem. Boats are chugging along. Now, the captain of the Meduse, it was controversial because he was promoted because of cronyism. He had no real experience being a captain of a boat. He just was popular with some people back home, and they said, we'll give you this boat. So he was he was an idiot, basically. This boat has 400 people on it. Going through the ocean, right? And what happens is the captain's dicking around. The boat keeps veering off course. He goes, you know what? I think I know a shortcut. Just all sorts of bad stuff. And he ends up getting separated from the other ships that were in the little fleet that was going with him. And he's messing around, and he's like, you know what? I think we can cut some time off if we go closer to the coast. And more experienced sailors were like, okay, but this area might have some sandbars that... And he's like, don't worry about it. The only bar I care about is the one in Margaritaville. So the boat's coming down the coast of Africa. And he, literally, the way I'm reading this article, I'm picturing it as the captain and one of his buddies are, having a chat as other people are running around the boat going, oh, dude, what? Oh my God, we're super close to the land. At one point, not the captain, another guy in his own volition, grabs this, depth measuring tool and throws it overboard and finds out, they're super close to the land. And again, this isn't like a rowboat. It's a ship that can hold 400 people. And he's yelling to the captain, dude, this is super dangerous. This is super, super dangerous. At that point, the captain kind of wises up, ends his conversation, and starts to try to control the ship, but it's too late. Water. It hits a sandbar. It's 30 miles from where it needs to be. It's basically 30 miles from land. The other two ships don't even know where this ship is. They don't have a radio, they don't have a phone, they don't have carrier pigeons, nothing like that. And so the captain's like, okay, this is bad. But we can stay here for a bit and figure stuff out. Storm starts rolling in, and they're like, okay, now this is really bad. The ship has a hole in it. It's stuck on the land. We don't have enough lifeboats to get everyone off. And they go, okay, well, let's do this. Let's take the boats we have, the long boats, and we'll just take turns. We'll go to the land, and we'll come back, and we'll go to the land and come back. And then they're like, we don't have time to do that, Captain. So then they come up with another plan. They go, let's build... Because if they see, this is one of those things that if they don't do anything, they're all dead. So they go, let's build a giant raft we'll put everyone who can get into a longboat gets on a longboat, which means the important people, including the captain. And then everyone else gets on this giant homemade raft that we're going to make, and we'll tow it with the longboat. So they begin assembling this raft before, a big storm hits. I wonder how long it took them to create it, actually, now that I think about it. But anyways, they build this giant raft. They named it the Machine. Not a very good name, but they named it Machine. This raft is 66 feet long and 23 feet wide. And you're thinking, that's pretty big. But they put on it 147 people. So imagine 147 people being trapped in a place that's 66 feet long, 23 feet wide, and that place can sink at any given moment. Wasn't the best constructed raft. But anyways, they're like, it's going to have to do. So everyone jumps on the raft. A couple of people said, you know what, we're going to take our chances we're just going to stay on the boat, and you guys can send a rescue crew back for us. The boat's not going anywhere. If a storm hits, we'll go underneath the boat, and hopefully we don't all get washed away. So everyone said their goodbyes. Well, not the people on the raft, but they said their goodbyes to the people on the boat. The raft gets tied to the longboats. Longboats start rowing towards the shore, 30 miles. And they don't get very far. And the people on the longboats start talking, and they're just like, just going as hard as they can. They keep looking back at this raft of 147 people, just like, it's not aerodynamic or not water dynamic, whatever it is. It's lagging them down. They're afraid a huge storm's going to come in and kill all of them. They turn to the captain and go, we got to cut it loose. There's no way we're going to make it to shore with this raft on our tail. And now, can you imagine? Now, this is where your interactive part starts to come in. You're sitting on that raft, and they threw a bunch of supplies on the raft, but they were boat supplies, not survival supplies. So they didn't have any sort of ability to steer the raft. They didn't have any navigation tools for the raft, no compass. They didn't even bring water with them. They put all the ship's wine on the raft, because again, they're just trying to carry the stuff from the raft to the mainland. They didn't think it was going to be that hard. But you're about, let's say they maybe got you 5 miles. So you're 25 miles from land, and you're on this raft. And it's hot, and only the center of the raft is super stable. So everyone kind of tries to stay in the center, and so your legs are wet, and you're sitting there. And you look, and you see people in the longboats kind of talking to each other. Can't really hear what they're saying. And then you see the captain nod, and people start cutting the ropes to your raft. Now, you know it's a death sentence. You absolutely know that if this raft just goes adrift 25 miles from land with no ability to steer it or maneuver it in any way, you can't hey, everyone on that side's paddle your hands, like you're toast. The panic that must have been going through those people as those ropes were getting cut. But the ropes are cut. The longboats just leave the raft of 147 people. Well, what are you going to do? Well, fights immediately break out on the raft. Because again, they're basically like, it's us or them. You had people form up into groups. You had sailors group up. There was a contingent of Marines. They grouped up. And then you had the passengers who were just going on this trip, this diplomatic mission, who weren't high enough to get into a boat. They're on this thing. The very first night. Okay, so it's bad. People are arguing. You see one guy get stabbed, throw him overboard. And because the center of the raft was the only stable part of the boat, people kept jostling as they got into the middle of the raft, and then a fight would break out. A fight to the death. Because if you lost that fight, you were going either overboard or you were just going to be on the edge of the boat and go overboard anyways. The first night passes. You go sleep. Sun comes up the next morning. There's 20 bodies. Out of the 146 people, 20 people died that first night. Some were suicides, which you got to be pretty determined to be able to commit suicide on a raft in the middle of nowhere. What do you do? Just drink a bunch of salt water? Get splinters everywhere? I don't know how they killed themselves on a raft. Other people were murdered for a prime spot. That would be a horrible thing to wake up to. You wake up, 20 people are dead. You're like, oh no, that guy owed me money. He's like, a bunch of splinters all over his body. So now we're down to 126 people. So let's say if you pick the number 5, you died that night. You're dead. If you pick the number 5, you're dead. Boat's going along. Like I said, they don't have any water, but they have a lot of wine, but that's not going to keep you hydrated. The machine, the rafts, going along. And I imagine at that point, it must be insanity. Because we had the first 20 die that night. And then even more, dozens of people died fighting over that middle spot or losing that spot and falling off the boat. Basically, imagine American Gladiators, but it's just water everywhere and you die a horrible death. So they're fighting. Some people are sitting in the middle. Some people can't get to the middle and the boat tips too much. You just roll off and drown. So let's say if you picked the number 7, that is your fate. You're either beat to death by a French sailor, or you say, I'd rather not get beat to death by a French sailor. I'll sit on the edge, and then you just fall off and get eaten by a jellyfish, ironically. A human-sized jellyfish eats you. We're on day 4. Only 67 people left out of 146. So we've lost a good amount of people. That's about half. So I'm going to get rid of 2 numbers now. These people were eaten. Now, not all of them, but at this point, and it's only day 4, they're like, we got to start eating people. We got to start eating people because we have no food. That's the only way to do it. So people got either killed for food, or there was still like some guy who committed suicide. They're like, I'll just leave him there. I'm too tired to move him. They eat him. So But in that time period of, let's say, if you pick the numbers 10, you get eaten. You get eaten on this boat. Day 8. It's day 8 now. Boats. It's in the middle of nowhere. I mean, they can't even see land at this point. There's not a lot of people left on the boat. You are, though. Well, let's see if you picked the lucky number. If you picked any number other than the number I'm about to reveal, you just died of an embarrassing death. If you picked 1 and 2, let's say you had explosive diarrhea. And just it blew up. Showered everyone with it. But anyway, so now there's a couple people left. And the strong on the boat, the ones who have maintained their strength this whole time, both mentally and physically, make a decision to save what very little supplies we have left. We have a bunch of beef jerry, and we have some soup of Sally. There was one woman on the boat, and they don't say when she died, but apparently she did. We have some soup of Sally over there, and we have this Tom ramen. We don't have a lot of cannibalized food left, so we're going to have to throw all the weak overboard. We're just going to murder them. So we know that we'll live a little bit longer. So the strong people, the Mongos of the vessel, pick up the weak and just toss them overboard. Or possibly killed them and ate them. It's possible too, but they definitely didn't make it. So if you picked, you got turned into a tasty delicacy. If you picked 6, you got an STD from a starfish that got you in the middle of the night. And if you picked, what other ones haven't I done? 8 or 9, you fell into the water, but your wrist got wrapped around a rope at the bottom of the machine. And so every time it came up a little bit from the wave, you would be able to get 1 breath of air, but then it would go back down and hold you underwater for 30 seconds. And then it would lift you up and you get 1 breath of air and it would hold you down for 30 seconds. And that just goes on and on for about 2 days until you suffocate. So, horrible death, guys. You won. Actually, if you picked number 3, you were one of the 15, which actually, out of 100, close to 150 people, 15 people lived. So if you picked number 3, you have survived the wreck of the Meduse. You had a 10% chance of making it. Some people had sexual relations with a starfish. Some people explosive diarrhea. Some people died in ways they actually died in on the Meduse. This all came out. Eventually, of course, the 15 guys did get rescued. And the captain was held liable for it, but not for, like, murder or anything like that he really should have been held liable for. He got held liable for basically abandoning his ship, and he served 3 years in jail. And that was it. And now the French have a law saying if you want to be promoted in the military, it has to be based on merit, not on who you know. So this incident did cause a lot of outrage in France. And it did become part of the law. And there's actually this famous picture called the Wreck of the Medusa, or the Raft of the Meduse, or something like that. It's this great not Renaissance, that was earlier, but it's this great painting. But people have also said that painting, it's kind of a symbol of hope, because everyone's like, yay, look at the rescue boat. It's that moment, rather than that first night where people are like cutting their throats with, boat rope. They're tying nautical knots around their neck. Like, it's this moment of hope, not this, like, horrible other 8 days of what actually went on. So some people consider that painting to be a whitewash. But I hope you lived. I hope you did not die during that little segment, especially not in some of the ways I made up. But I hope you guys had fun either way. I had fun. I think that's an interesting story. Like I said, I like stories about, I think being lost at sea is very terrifying. I'm sure it happens all the time, and we never hear about it because no one gets rescued. It's just a boat disappearing. That was a clip from our daily podcast, Dead Rabbit Radio. Dead Rabbit Radio is available anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It's daily paranormal, conspiracy, and true crime news. If you want to hear the full episode that this clip came from, check the link below. Please like and subscribe. And hit that little bell, too. That does some magical stuff. Thanks, guys.